All right, people. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. I know Mondays be Mondaying, but I'm always excited because it is yet another Transform 314 show. And I am even more so excited because y'all don't have to hear me blab on and on about stuff going on in local government tonight. No, no, ma'am, no, sir. No, because we have a special guest in our virtual building um, to have a very important conversation and to lift up a really great way for folks to be engaged and involved in how their communities are designed. So, without further ado, I am excited to welcome anyone out there. Feel free to, you can do your little round of applause or whatever. We have Miriam Keller from the City of St. Louis's Planning and Urban Design Agency. Yay!
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Happy Monday.
Thank you so much for hopping on here, Miriam. You could have been doing 3,000,000 other things. So thank you for hopping on our platform tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. I just really appreciate it.
Of course. So before we get into the strategic land use plan and all of that fun stuff, I kind of wanted to do a bit of a level set for folks that may not be aware of the Planning and Urban Design Agency or any of that. So before we get into it, right, like feel free to introduce yourself any other way you would like to, and tell the people, what do you really do?
What do I really do? Well, I'm Miriam Keller. I am a city resident. I work for the City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency. And what do I do? Basically, in my job, I'm tasked with a few different things, kind of a combination of big planning questions that come up, helping to do the research, do the work to figure out what is kind of the best path forward on something like a rezoning or a zoning policy change. But then also, and this is what we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think, is think ahead to the future and managing a project right now called the Strategic Land Use Plan of the Comprehensive Plan. Think ahead to the future, kind of with everybody, with the community, to set a vision that we can use as sort of our North Star as a community to shape all the decisions we make along the way.
Thank you. Oh, are you still going?
No.
I had a follow-up question because you mentioned the term. I don't know if people know what it means, but you mentioned like zoning, rezoning. Can you kind of define that for folks that may not be familiar with what zoning is?
Yeah, for sure. So zoning is basically a set of rules that defines how we can use land. So city governments, almost every city government in the United States has a set of rules that say, like, hey, in this type of district, you can do this. You can open a restaurant, buildings can be this tall, things like that. So there's kind of a book of rules, and then there's a map that says which rules apply where. So, for example, in a commercial district, that will be shown on a map, sort of, and then that will mean that a certain set of rules for commercial districts apply to this part of the city.
And then, like, what is the process? And I know you talked about like rezoning and other things. So, what is that process if a developer comes in and they want to make a multi-use, like they want to create this multi-use situation, development, but the zoning in that area, it doesn't align, it doesn't match with that. So, like, what happens then?
Yeah, so if that developer owns the property or has the permission of the property owner, they can apply and say, hey, I want to change the rules that apply to this property from one set of regulations to another. So that's called a rezoning. It's basically looking at the map and saying, like, hey, I don't want to be in the A single family district anymore. I want to be in the B single family district. So people can apply. There's a process, and to evaluate that's one of my roles. I work with also my colleagues in the zoning section of the building division, and we look at like, hey, does that make sense? But one of the big things that our department does is we say, well, does this sync up with any plan? So that's one of the really important roles of plans is, we go through a process with community members to say, generally, what is our vision for what the future is? And if somebody wants to rezone something that syncs up with that vision, then we say, this is a good idea. And we, as staff, will recommend to the Planning Commission, which is a citizen-led body. We would recommend to them, like, hey, we think this is a good idea. We present why. And then they pass those recommendations on to the Board of Aldermen, which ultimately, would formally pass that as law. So basically, if it syncs up with a plan, we give it a thumbs up. If it doesn't, we recommend against it. And the Planning Commission will say, like, oh, we received this application, but it doesn't sort of align with, or it's not in keeping with these plans, and they can decide from there. If they decide to not recommend it to the Board of Aldermen can still override that, but it requires more votes. So basically, our plans are a way of setting the parameters for what development is appropriate where.
Yes, thank you for breaking that down to folks, because I think that's something that people may not, the general public may not be aware of those types of processes. And I wanted to back up to the Planning Commission, like the process of the rezoning process. So residents, they can provide comments or right? Like these are public meetings, right?
100%. Yeah. And actually, we hold a formal public hearing at every Planning Commission meeting where a rezoning is on the agenda. So if somebody's rezoning their property, anybody can submit written comment or come and testify during the meeting. We have been holding them both in person and virtually. So we try to make it easy for people to participate. The meeting agenda that's posted on the city's website always has that information. And if there is a rezoning, we also, and this is actually kind of like not a requirement, but something we do as practice, we send postcards to people nearby, and then we also email neighborhood associations and say, like, hey, there's this rezoning on the agenda. Want to make sure you all know about it. Here's how you can provide comment if you want.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. Shout out to y'all for doing that. And I do want to lift up the Planning Commission. I don't catch all of the meetings. I try to, but like as a resident, that's how I learn about just different things that are going on throughout the city. And people are like, dang, Kelly, how do you know this? Like, I am not that important, y'all. I am not that special. I just listen into a lot of y'all's meetings that are available on YouTube, so people can watch them after the fact and head to the city's website to get agendas and as you described, kind of providing the information on what's being discussed at those meetings. But I do want to plug the Planning Commission meetings because I learn a lot about the different things that are going on throughout the city.
And I'm just going to add a shout out to our commissioners who just consistently ask good questions. As we as staff bring our best research and notes, but the commissioners really take their role seriously and ask good questions.
Oh yeah, they don't play. They don't play. So taking a bit of a step back from the Planning Commission, I guess, can you speak a little bit about like, and I want people to know, okay, the Planning and Urban Design Agency, can you describe the staffing that you all have? Like how many staff members make up the Planning and Urban Design Agency for the city of St. Louis?
Yeah, I can describe. So there are a few pieces of the Planning and Urban Design Agency, and I'm definitely going to get this number wrong. We're somewhere between, I don't know, 24 and 28 people. Don't quote me on it, but Not a huge department, but in our department, we do actually a few different things. So we have the planning division that does, generally speaking, the types of things that I was describing and, does planning. Then also within the Planning and Urban Design Agency, we have the Sustainability Office. And let's see, our sustainability director, our current sustainability director, has been with us, I want to say just over 6 months. So she's still building things out. We're trying to staff that up. We also have the Cultural Resources Office, and they're like the historic preservation people. So they administer all of the regulations and local historic districts, and they can, help create new historic districts or new city landmarks. And then we also have a mapping and graphics division because, maps and graphics, really important part of doing all this right.
Thank you for that. I didn't even yeah, a couple of those things I didn't even realize were part of your underneath y'all's umbrella there.
Yeah, I'll say, small but mighty crew, trying to build out more capacity, bit by bit.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And then yeah, the sustainability efforts. Again, happy to hear that that's moving forward.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty encouraging because there are a lot of people that do have obviously those concerns in making sure that we are moving sustainably in how we're designing and thinking forward, right? Beyond just today, with our city and how it's made up. So, and I've been hyping this conversation up with people because I think like planning, and we talked about this before. Obviously, there's no one like entity or one organization or one thing or one policy, right? That will just solve all of the issues and all of the problems. When we're talking about some of the like inequities that we see. Before we get into, because we're going to talk about the strategic land use plan, but before we get into that, I did kind of want to talk and speak and want you to speak to, and you spoke about this in one of the workshops I attended, about some of the unfortunate art history as a city of St. Louis, and especially I mean, in planning in general. I'm not just trying to stick it to the city of St. Louis, but a lot of harmful racist policies through, I know, like a lot, Harlan Bartholomew is a name that a lot of people mention, not in a positive way, especially when we're talking about this urban renewal um, trend, unfortunately, that resulted in the dismantling of communities like Mill Creek Valley and others, just completely decimated Black communities for the sake of building highways and other things. So I guess, can you speak to this history a bit? And also, what are some current efforts that y'all are have underway to try to not only just acknowledge those wrongs and also like address them?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just really baked into the history of every American city, and probably I just maybe know urban history better, but that's probably true of rural communities, right? That is just baked into American history. Um, and St. Louis is no exception. And in fact, we probably uh, are a shining example of some of the most notorious types of policies, like redlining, which of course was like had the endorsement of the federal government, like explicitly racist zoning policy, like, and I mean explicit, uh, in the earliest versions of zoning, um, racially restrictive covenants. I mean, even just determining what types of housing can be built where, that has like class implications, right? Um, I mean, where industry is relative to different kinds, like the health impacts of that. I mean, so yeah, it's just really broad reaching. And of course, it has inertia. Like just because we remove those policies doesn't mean that the problems have gone anywhere. Um, so yeah, I think planners across the country are still trying to figure out how to affirmatively sort of address that history. Um, and so I don't think we have everything figured out as a city or as a city planning and urban design agency or planning division. But some of the things we are trying to do is sort of proactively plan with those things in mind, like recognizing those histories in every planning process we do. Because I think it's a pretty important way of understanding why our neighborhoods and why our city looks the way it does. Um, and using those planning efforts then to like inform how we update policy. So I think that's true of strategic land use plan, which we'll get into, and then we're also trying to kind of keep going and really accelerate a neighborhood planning program that will, because like the citywide plan, which we'll talk about in a second, think of that as sort of the broad brushstrokes for the city. The neighborhood plans are like a much more fine-grained, very detailed plan. So we're trying to do those as well, and really at the same time as we can. And like I described, we're working on building our capacity to do more of that. But I think doing that with a mind toward this history, and also the way we do it, which is, not just top down, but like, really engaging people in the process of understanding the options and setting the priorities.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that and lifting that up. I think as we are working to engage and include as many folks as possible in whether it's getting involved in neighborhood planning efforts and the strategic land use plan efforts, which y'all we gonna get into, I know. But I think it's important that we acknowledge, like, again, historically, like what has been done. And we also acknowledge this is one of the reasons why people ain't checking on engaging in these processes either, because of that past and that history. And I also appreciate you saying, hey, like, we don't have all the answers, right? Like, and this is going to take a long time to overcome because it's so pervasive. And it's going to take some time, but we have to start somewhere. And so I receive that for sure.
Yeah, and I also think this history, I mean, maybe it's just too obvious to say, is just like broken a lot of trust, right? So I think we got to earn that back by doing this stuff as genuinely as we can.
All right, y'all. So we keep talking about the strategic land use plan. I know people are like, okay, Kelly, geez, we get it, right? What is this? So I am going to, we're going to get into that conversation now. So shout out to Miriam, who's provided some really awesome slides for us to be able to view. So I am pulling it up now. Okay.
Yeah, great.
You see my screen?
I can.
Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So Miriam, lay it on us. What is the strategic land use plan? Let's get into it.
For sure. This is going to get maybe a little bit wonky, but hopefully not too much. So I'll try to keep it, worthwhile for everybody's time. So the strategic land use plan is a core element of what we call our city's comprehensive plan. So like I use that term specifically because it like has a specific legal presence in state law and local law. So we keep trying to keep that in the mix so people know like this thing is the legal thing. But what that is basically is a policy guide for a city's long-term evolution. So kind of like I was describing with zoning, the comprehensive plan is meant to be the basis for policies that shape a city's evolution. It's a high-level plan, typically with a sort of long-term planning horizon. Think kind of like a generation, 15, 20, 25 years. And it doesn't control everything. I'll get into that in a little bit, but it does kind of set a vision, a clear vision through a community engaged process that sets the parameters for development.
Yeah. I love the high level plan for a plan of plans. I'm telling you, that lays it out.
So, yeah. So I mentioned the strategic land use plan is what we call like the land use element of a comprehensive plan. There can be other elements. So the land use element is about like how we use land, like it maybe like it sounds, though I know that even that's probably like what does that mean? But so the land use element, which is like a pretty core central piece of a comprehensive plan. It's really in a way the most fundamental. And there can be other elements like sustainability, like mobility. And actually, the city pretty soon, this year is going to be, for the first time in a long time, making a citywide transportation and mobility plan. So the idea is part of that becomes part of this comprehensive plan. And we're going to do a lot of work to make sure land use and mobility stuff, links together, right? And there can be other elements in the future. And then, so I mentioned neighborhood plans.
Mm-hmm.
When those are formally adopted by the Planning Commission, we call them supplements to the comprehensive plan. So they're like a detailed zoom in on part of the city. And we use it in a similar way, where if a rezoning application comes through, we check it against the neighborhood plan.
Mm.
Or redevelopment plans is a type of ordinance that kind of enables the use of tax incentives for a certain area. Those are also things that, like legally, the Planning Commission reviews against a comprehensive plan to make sure we're not doing that stuff willy-nilly, right? But, for example, if we're granting tax abatement for housing, we want to make sure that housing is going in the right place in the city.
And so, again, I just want the people out there to understand. Again, it's not a silver bullet necessarily. And however, this serves as a foundation, and it is something that is referred to and checked on when we're talking about any type of development or any like major building, like those types of things. This is the foundation in consideration to make sure that it aligns with the plan.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is totally correct. It does not sit on a shelf. I use it every week. Even today. Also, variances, which are, if people are like close on complying with zoning, but they need a little bit of an exception, they can request a variance, and the Board of Adjustment hears that. And so this is another way we use the comprehensive plan. We now write memos to the Board of Adjustment saying like, hey, if you did this, would that be like in keeping with or not in keeping with the comprehensive plan? So that's just my way of saying like, yeah, we use it all the time.
I just want the people to know it is not on the shelf collecting dust. It is something that you all use.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a land use plan currently, and this is kind of like what it is in a nutshell. It is brief. And when it was made in 2005, it was like a huge step forward. But it is a fairly concise plan. And how it works is there are like 10 different land use designations, and you can see those listed on the left. And each one has a sort of corresponding like description of what what the plan wants to see happen there. So, for example, neighborhood commercial area, NCA, that's the pink on the map, if you can see that. And that is basically saying like, hey, we're looking for neighborhood serving commercial development and mixed use development along commercial corridors. So if something comes through that like doesn't match that, we have to recommend against it. Mm-hmm. So each of these designations is mapped onto the city, covering the whole city, at roughly like a sort of block level of specificity. So not super fine grained, but like comprehensive in the sense it's covering the whole city.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I mentioned the current plan was made in 2005. And what we're doing is in this process is not just a like a little tweak. We are thinking about the whole thing. Like, is the map right? Are those designations right? Because I think if you read the plan, which again, the current plan, I want to give it the credit it's due. It like before this 2005 plan was made, the last formal plan on the books we think was like from the late 40s. So like the
Yeah.
2005 plan, big step forward, but it's very concise. And I think if you look at it, you'll see like it doesn't directly say, like it doesn't directly address things like economic justice or walkability or like transit oriented development or climate resilience. So, in this process, I think we want to build out the plan into like a much more robust and a thorough, detailed, and also very clear. So, like anybody picking it up, reading it, would know exactly what it's saying and recommending. And we want to make sure that we that the plan reflects. I mean, I think these priorities, but also other things that come up in the process. Housing affordability has come up. So, what does that mean from a land use perspective? We need to bake in those values into the plan.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask, I didn't know if you knew, but I guess before the 2005 um whatever update, yeah, I didn't know that the one before that one was like in I had no clue that was that is a large period of time. Okay, so I did not know
Yeah.
that at all.
And I don't think that plan from the 40s was still in use. Like, and I'm also no scholar of St. Louis planning history, and there were other attempts at making plans, and there was some sort of informal guidance that was being used, but like an official comprehensive plan, a big gap there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to lift up, even though I've been a little bit engaged and involved in this process. However, I appreciate again, like looking again this holistic view and incorporating and better reflecting again the other priorities that are listed there. And you also mentioned like housing affordability, which is huge. So I think that's a great step too.
So we kind of got into this because people ask, like, well, if we make this vision, is it going to happen? And, you know, Kelly and I were like talking about this earlier. It's like, I don't want to like overpromise that this plan is going to change everything about the city of St. Louis. But I think we kind of got to do our best with this tool, like of the many levers at our disposal as a community. Like this is one of them, and it sets the parameters for development. But the other thing I want to mention is that one of the things we want to do is like once we finish this plan, once it's formally adopted, we want to use it to actually like proactively update our zoning code so that the rules on the books, that the map matches the goals. So if this process is kind of about at the highest level, like setting the goals, we need to make sure that our rules help us achieve those goals. So we're kind of, we're planning to do that. There's still some things that need to kind of fall into place to make that happen, but that's the idea. That's the goal. Yeah, and so we've been. I mentioned this process, like we need to do it with people, with people involved in the process. And so we've been trying to connect with people and make this plan and the process to update it like relevant and connected to people's lived experience in different ways. So it's kind of a listing of all the different types of ways we're trying to do that. And yeah, so the surveys, there's actually, and I'll come back to this at the end, but one out now that we really want to make sure everybody tuning into this knows about. But there are also going to be a bunch more workshops coming up in March and then early April. So we'll have information about that definitely before I say goodbye to you all.
Yes.
Well, I mentioned the steering committee, and Kelly is actually on our steering committee, but others too. And I guess I wanted to mention this because we formed our steering committee in a way that is a little bit different, maybe from the typical. Like typically, you might say like, "Hey, here are some usual suspects," or like people we know that we think would add value. Like it's not like malintended or anything. The sort of like talking to people who are in the loop, but we ended up doing things a little bit differently, which was, we let anybody apply. And then actually we kind of, I mean, with a few parameters to make sure we were like getting people who live in different parts of the city and things like that. It was basically a random selection of all of the eligible applicants, because what we wanted is maybe not the usual suspects. We can get them and their perspective more easily. But in this forming of the steering committee, which is sort of the group who, at key milestones in the process, is making sure we're on track and steering us at key forks in the road. We wanted to make sure that we just had a broader spectrum of people and types of experiences in the city.
Yeah, because I am going to be completely honest, Miriam, because people are like, oh, you should apply for this. You should apply for this. I'm like, I don't know. And I was very surprised.
What, that you were selected?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, it was, we weren't handpicking. It was random, but
yeah. And so I really do, the other steering committee members, shout out to them, a wide range and various like perspectives and lived experience. And like, it's definitely, I think it's very reflective, I would say, more so than typical, what you may think of kind of that group.
So the other group I wanted to mention is these working groups. So I talked about those different priorities we want to make sure are really reflected. So in addition to the steering committee, we have also kind of gotten some partners to the table who are doing work, not solely in like development or building or land use, but like lots of different types of work in the community. So people who maybe are spending most of their time, for example, thinking about trees and planting more trees. Like we want their perspective in this plan, because as planners, it is like we can't assume that we have all of the right experience at the table, just internal to our team, to get this plan right. So these working groups are kind of about bringing together a wide range of technical background into the process. So we have 3 working groups: quality of life, resilience, and equity. So really, those are kind of the pillars of how we're focusing this process, and we have a working group in each. So yeah, this is roughly where we are in the process. We've like taken in the first 2 phases, prepare and analyze, taken in a lot of information. We've done kind of 2 big rounds of community engagement so far. And we're at the point where we're trying to sort of define the vision, the future vision for land use. And that will become, and by vision, I mean like vision statements of what do we want our city to be in the future. Mm-hmm. So those vision statements are going to then become the foundation for updating those designations, for looking at the map, for like the sort of crunchy planning stuff. So the survey that's out right now is about getting people's feedback on some draft vision statements to make sure we really dial that in and get it right before we proceed with the rest of the process. So we kind of have like 7 themes around which vision statements are starting to converge. So this is maybe the like broad framework for the vision statements, but I'll say when you take the survey, you'll see there's more detail to how we're trying to flesh this out and get people's feedback. Yes, upcoming opportunities to get involved. Yeah, so the survey. Can take it online. Is there a way I can drop the URL in the chat, or I
Sure.
have it on another slide too, but
Oh, yeah, because what I will do, I'll post the URL like when after the fact, I'll put it in the comments so people can click it and have access to it,
okay,
if that
cool.
makes sense. Yes, y'all. Take a survey.
So survey, and then also some workshops coming up. So a big one on March 19th where we're going to get people's input and sort of reaction to a bunch of the mapping and information we've collected, but also hopefully this is fun. It'll be fun for me, but celebrating the release of the second edition of what we're calling the SLUP Scoop. So it's kind of this like newspaper format newsletter about the process. So it'll be kind of a little bit of a release party, if you will, for that, but also a workshop. And then after that, we have a bunch of other workshops that are a little bit smaller group, right? So, we're trying to give different opportunities and different types of environments and different parts of the city, some also online, just to make sure people have a range of opportunities to get involved.
I really want to lift this up, this celebration, okay, on the 19th. People better get into it. It's gonna be at the Third Degree Glass Factory. I don't know if people have been to this space before. It is a complete vibe. It is incredible. It is an awesome space. So I feel like that is a really great like backdrop for any type of a celebration. And I mean, just to be there. It is an awesome space. So y'all please make sure you come out to that.
Yeah, it should be fun. Should be fun. Cool maps, I promise.
Oh yeah.
Come join. Yeah, and so this is kind of the go-to place to track the information about the rest of the process. The website sloop-stl.com, and then also from there you'll see the Instagram handle. The team working on this with the city is doing a lot to post stuff on Instagram too, so that's a fun place to follow it and not miss anything.
Yes, please, y'all follow that because it makes me feel it makes me feel like dang, I need to be posting more stuff on the Transform 314 Instagram. That Instagram account is very consistent and popping.
Yeah, they're keeping it busy.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, is that pretty much it, Miriam, with the slides?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Wow. Well, I know I feel more informed. Um, is there before we kind of wrap our conversation up, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to share. We'll obviously plug the survey. We'll be sure to share the link as well, where folks can find out not only just like more information about the SLUP, but ways they can get engaged. We'll share the social media handles as well. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to kind of add.
Only that, I mean, if anybody wants to learn more about this or more about anything the Planning and Urban Design Agency does, definitely feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'll, Kelly, I know you have my contact information, but I'll drop it here in the chat too in case that somehow makes it easier to share. But yeah, happy to tell anybody anything more anytime.
And again, y'all, we talked about this before we hopped on, and Miriam mentioned it. Like, obviously, there's now one entity, one policy, one plan that is going to simply like change and address a lot of the issues that we have. But I think it's making sure that we use our lanes, our respective lanes, and our tools and the things that we can within our reach to bring about the changes that we want to see. And so That's it. I'm not going to be on a soapbox tonight, y'all. But please make sure that you tap in, that you are engaged, and that you lend your voice, because this is something that will shape our city for many years to come. So I'll be sure to share all the information. I'll also share Miriam's contact information too, if folks have any questions or anything else. And in addition to the SLUP stuff, but just, some of the things in general, because she shared some other important factors about the Planning and Urban Design Agency and how that work it impacts our communities and our broader cities. So again, Miriam, thank you so much for hopping on our platform on a Monday evening of all evenings. So I really do want to thank you again for hopping on with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. That is, I mean, yeah, fun conversation. And I'm a geek. I will happily talk about planning anytime. But yeah, just appreciate the opportunity to share this with people, make sure more people know about it.
And I will say, maybe I shouldn't say this on the recording, but whatever. If I have any questions, and if we have questions, hopefully if you're available to
Totally.
grace our platform again, hopefully we can make that work in the future for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right, y'all. Yep. See, there you go. It is time. It is time to end the conversation. So thank y'all out there. Please be safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.